Kenya, which is one of the leading producers of geothermal power in the world, plans to ramp up its generation to about 5,000 megawatts in about 10 years' time, as outlined in the National Energy Policy by the government. One of the organizations which is set to play a critical role in ensuring that this dream is achieved is the Geothermal Development Company. Now, joining us tonight is the Managing Director, Othieno. He's going to explain to us where are we in terms of meeting this dream despite the challenges and the successes along the way. Thank you so very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely you're not new in the energy sector.
That's true.
Before you were in the distribution, and now here you are in the generation. 4 months down the line, I would want to hear what kind of a transition have you gone through?
Certainly the transition has been very interesting in that I've come in from in the generation space with an eye towards the challenges and the opportunities that I found exists with the distributor as the off-taker. So the transition has been interesting in that what I used to see as major challenges that were obtaining for most of the generating companies, I'm able then to have a lens that can be able to then make me drive the energy sector, what I can say, the energy sector targets and the energy sector aspirations a bit better in terms of therefore trying to see that the country can be able to afford low cost of power ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And just like you have just put it, I mean, you have an advantage where you sit, because this is not a new field for you. You have been in the energy sector for quite a long time. And from where you sit now, what would you say are the challenges that are affecting Kenya's energy generation platform or plans?
Now, I'll look at specifically the geothermal. Geothermal gives an opportunity for the country, first of all, in renewable energy, and also geothermal gives an opportunity to the country to have a resource that can be able to provide a base load with a very high capacity factor. If you compare it with the other renewable sources like wind, solar, etc., you have a reliable base load. And geothermal energy, if the costs, the upfront costs are de-risked, then it can afford the country an opportunity for investors, therefore, then to plug in with a source of energy then that can be able to bring down the ultimate cost of power that the off-taker will definitely get, and thereafter then pass through to the customers. So to me, geothermal offers this country a very good opportunity if we can harness it. The thing that I'm looking at now from geothermal is, or rather from the Geothermal Development Company, is to see how I can then be able to drive the timely completion of projects as one of the biggest challenges that we've had in GDC. I want to really look at the financial sustainability of GDC with a view of looking at whether there are opportunities to diversify revenue streams within GDC so that I can be weaned out of exchequer funding, so that, and then thirdly, engage as much as possible major stakeholders with a view of then supplementing or supporting the government's role in initiatives in resource mobilization.
You know, Kenya's dalliance with geothermal date back to more than 60 years. You're talking about around 1950s.
Yes.
And until 1981, that's when the country was able to tap and to harness the geothermal energy. You know, it's all carrier one.
Yes.
When you look, you know, at the history and the level and the depth of generation, now we're talking about almost 900 megawatts.
Yes.
in a span of almost 7 decades.
Yeah.
Would you say this has been an impressive growth?
Certainly, it is an impressive growth. And looking at after those 70 years, as you say, what is the kind of traction that we have within the geothermal field, starting from maybe the time when GDC was put up as a special purpose vehicle to de-risk, then you can see that the growth of geothermal capacity in terms of megawatts on power generation has actually moved quite faster. So in my opinion, I think that having to go to a position 7 worldwide in geothermal amongst the geothermal countries is a testament to Kenyans' desire to be able to harness geothermal energy. So I think we are on the right track. The only thing is then that we need to put our eyes on the ball, focus on our own efficiencies, with a view therefore to now move faster towards the development of geothermal energy.
And when you look at the pace of generation, and one would comfortably argue and say that from the first power plant or geothermal plant in Okare back in 1981 and up to the year 2020, one would comfortably say that about 85% of the geothermal power that has been generated in this country so far, has been generated in the last 15 years.
Yes.
And so one would arguably say that in the last 45, almost 50 years, there was a lull in terms of generation. And so the question comes, what are we doing to ensure that in the next 20, 30 years, our growth is accelerated?
Okay, I'll look at it from now geothermal development company, as it were. And as I said earlier, is that the apparent or the upfront risks associated with geothermal are such that an investor may be sinking a well, all things going constant in on a greenfield. We are talking about 3.5 million USD. So this one, in a way,
that's about 350 million.
Yes. So this in a way will keep investors, and we are talking about exploratory wells, which you have 50% success. So what the government has done in terms of therefore providing this de-risking then provides an opportunity for both us and our sister agency, KenGen, to be able then to rope in investors at a time when it can be able to provide them with the kind of revenue streams that can be able to give them opportunities for financiers to rope in. And I think the timing upon which we rope in the independent power producers is critical, because then it not only gives assurance at the time that the resource is developed in a way that they can have financial closure, it provides the risks apparent to them be reduced. So I think where we are going and what I'm seeing up front with what we are about to witness in a couple of weeks' time, when we now go towards the generation of power, it will be an exciting period for not only GDC but for the country as well. Yes.
When you look at the last 12 years, since GDC was formed, to try and de-risk the sector, and it's proper to say that exploration as well as a generation of geothermal power is an expensive undertaking, and so this is why a lot of investors were not keen, to come and start and invest their money in a greenfield, project. So far, what would you say has been the significant achievement of GDC so far?
The significant achievement of GDC so far in terms of providing an opportunity for, and I'll take an example of Menengai. Menengai, initially when we came in, we had what we call a STEAM model, where we had the IPPs coming in at a time when we were doing the exploration, doing the appraisal and the production field. So this, because we had already procured them earlier on, they were with us and going through. This then did not give us an opportunity, if I look at it in hindsight, for us to be able to bring them in at a time when they could have enough comfort in terms of the reservoir capacity, so that they could come very close to financial closure. Now, from the lessons that we've learned, I believe that going forward, we shall now be bringing in IPPs in the next prospects in a time when we already have developed the resource. We've already assessed the resource well enough, so that by the time we sign a peace agreement with them, or we sign a PPA with them, then the time between the signing and fruition of the project becomes very, very, what can I say, very short, as it were.
You know, one of your key project has been the Menengai Geothermal project within Nakuru County, and of course you have other projects, you know, in Baringo, and the geothermal, the Menengai one is very special to GDC, because this is like the baby that was birthed. Yes. And this is like a project that you have taken and you want to show the world, hey, look, here we are, this is our product. How much potential have you managed to get out of a Menengai geothermal project?
Okay, maybe taking you through the Menengai project. We started Menengai project in 2011. And there have been a lot of financiers from FDB which have financed us in drilling. We've had AFD which have brought us the rigs. We've had USAID who have done the direct use. So a myriad and a portfolio of development partners, and of course the Kenyan government. So when we started at 2011, we started phase 1, where we've done about 52 wells. No, we've done so far 52 wells in both phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1, 49 of them were some exploration, some of them were appraisal wells, and some were the production well. Now, after we got the STEAM report being the report that will be able to tell you how much capacity in terms of power generation you can be able to get from that resource, we are currently talking about 170, give or take, megawatts, which then we have about 105, which we've now been able to sign the PISA agreement with 3 IPPs, each one to develop 35 megawatts. There's Socian, there is Quantum, and there is Or Power 2. So in terms of the infrastructure that is supposed to support power generation, everything is complete. We have done the steam gathering system, which is just awaiting commissioning. The only challenge we had is that when the commissioning engineer was here in March, the COVID pandemic struck and he had to go back to his country in Italy. But now that the protocols have now been lessened in terms of travel, we believe that he should be coming back soon, so that he can then be able to commission. Upon that, then the entry of the first IPP, who has now met all the requirements and the CPs, then they should be able to come in a week or 2 weeks' time. Upon us handing them over the site, then they can be able to then generate their 35 megawatts of power. So in terms of resource availability, the geothermal resource is available for the power producers. Then phase 2, as I said, is intended to bring on board another 60 megawatts, which we already have done 8 wells. So we are still in the process of both doing the exploration and appraising the capacity of that. And then thereafter we can do the phase 3 later on the Menengai West side, which will take another 100 or so megawatts. So in terms of resource availability, we are ready now to move to the next phase of power generation.
And I mean, when you look at, since, the IPP, the agreement with the IPP was signed, for the generation of the first 105 megawatts. I mean, up to now, we are talking about almost 5 years down the line. I mean, don't you think this is some sort of a deterrent measure for future investors to come on board?
I wouldn't say so. I told you about the model that was initially envisaged then, and that model then had hoped that all things going constant, we shall be able to have both parties trying to fulfill some of the conditions precedent to be able to move to the generation. But we also had certain challenges. One being that one of the critical condition that the investors required was land. So we had then to negotiate, first of all, with the private landowners within Menengai, and also we then approached Kenya Forest Service, where we acquired about 11,000 acres of land where we leased. So this one then opened up because that was one of the major conditions of providing land. Then the other one that took a long while, as I said earlier, is to provide the STEAM report. STEAM report is a report that can give assurance to the investors that there is enough resource to be able for them to have their revenue sustained within the time of the PPA. So this one is a very detailed and scientific studies which you can only do upon you drilling more wells. And I think that is what then took quite some time in terms of us providing the IPPs with what I can call the conditions which can be able to let them then go to site and start putting up their plans. Mm-hmm. So we've learned from that. Mm-hmm. So what we are saying is that in future models, we would try to rope in or procure the IPPs when we already have a very resolute STEAM report that can be able to tell the investors this is what we are offering, come in within this time, and then give us assurance therefore that your plant will be ready by this time.
So when should we as a country expect to have these 105 megawatts being fed into the national grid, and what impact will these have on, number one, the quality of energy and in this country, and number two, the cost implication?
As I started earlier, in terms of timelines, all things going constant, is that when I look at the 3 IPPs, the first one being Socian Power has reached financial close. They have given us the construction security that we required of them. They have given us the insurances that were supposed to be in place before they could go to site. So as of today, Socian had met all the requirements. So we intend, therefore, maybe within this 1 week, if we can be able to agree, we can give them what we can call the notice to proceed, and then we can then hand them over the site. Now, it's envisaged that within 15 months, they're supposed to have completed the power plant and be able to feed the 35 megawatts to the national grid.
That is 1 year and 3 months?
No, 15 months, yeah.
15 months.
Yes,
That's
1 year,
1 year,
1 year and 3 months. Now, when you look at the infrastructure that is supposed to support this haulage of power into the national grid, it's already in place. I think the national government, through our sister agency, KETRACO, had already put up the substation, which is ready. We have a transmission line, 132 kV line, all the way from Menengai to Solio substation, that is along Nakuru Eldoret Road, next to the former Eveready. There's a station there. So that one is in place. So if they can be able to meet their schedule, and we are going to ensure and we enforce, and we are going to really push them to meet within the required timings, then we should be able to get the first 35 megawatts onto the grid. Now, the next one is, which we are looking closer following up, is Quantum. Quantum, the only thing that is required of ourselves and of course the national government is that we provide them with indemnity agreement so that they can be able to guarantee the partial risk guarantee that has been provided. The moment that one is finalized, and we are in consultation with National Treasury, AG Chambers and the Ministry of Energy, and I think we are moving very well. The moment we get that one, then from Quantum side, they have reassured us that the moment that one is done, then they should be able then to also reach financial close, and thereafter also join Socian, so that we can be able then to have the next 35 megawatts, and the timelines are the same. Then the last one, which is Or Power 22, we are still in final stages of trying to secure the letter of support from Treasury. And the moment we have that one done, then they should also then join in. And then the last 35 megawatts. Now, what is the import of all this when it comes to the national grid? 105 megawatts in a national grid of about 2,000 is substantial, because our kind of demand currently is about, give or take, about 2,000 megawatts. So when you talk about an additional 105 megawatts, is substantial. It's substantial also coming from a resource that has been de-risked, which means then that the cost of power that is coming into the grid will also be cheaper. The last PISA is the project implementation steam sales agreement that we had between ourselves and Kengen, and the one that we've also had with the independent power producers. We are talking about the cumulative cost to be about 0.07 US cents per kilowatt hour. So with that as a base load of that magnitude coming into the grid, then we are starting looking at the horizons where the cost of power then now starts coming down. So that to me is the import of cost. In terms of reliability as well, is that this base load, as we talked about, being reliable with a good capacity factor, therefore affords the off-taker with a source that is very stable. And with that, then they can be able then to manage the variabilities that you can be able to talk about with other renewable resources like wind and solar. So these ones will provide them with that evening of generation, as it were.
And one of the low moment for the corporation was in 2015, when allegations of corruption, were leveled against senior officials of GDC, and we still know that these there are issues of arbitration that are ongoing, in the court of law, and some of the challenges were, illegal awarding of contracts and so much. I know you are new into this institution, but how do you plan to do things differently, to ensure that such a low moment doesn't happen in the future?
If you ask me, I think the industry and of course Geothermal as a company has learned its lessons from that very bad patch in its reputation, and I think also it brought in all these issues that we're talking about in delays and the efficiencies that you've seen such a project not moving fast enough. Now GDC has progressed beyond that. We have a new 5-year strategic plan, one of which is hinged on two very critical core values, one being professionalism and another one being integrity. And now these are the values that I have decided to drive. Integrity has within it all this element of ethical practices in it. So this is what I intend to drive with a passion, so that if there are any processes that can be able to provide an opportunity for wet areas of corruption, we need to nab it. If there are policies that are not in tandem, which can be able to provide gaps in terms of both procurement and contract management, we are looking at those ones so that we can be able to close that gap. But by and large, we are now driving a GDC that will be a bit more ethical. And so far, in the last 4 months that I've been around, we've tried as much as possible to manage most of these contracts in a way that we've not even seen any litigation so far that has been brought to our attention. So it gives us hope that we are on the right path. But as you say, we need to still push and push and push that the ethical culture will be institutionalized within GDC, and that one can only be put in place if we have a high performance culture. And that is what I then intend to keep driving, so that people are ethical and at the same time we demand performance from each and every employee who is in GDC.
Very well. Finally, what do you see happening in your sector in the next 5 years that will develop or that will drive growth of geothermal extraction in this country?
What I'm seeing, and this is something that we've started negotiating, as it were, and bringing on board different stakeholders. I'm seeing a geothermal that not only provides the independent power producers with steam to be able to generate power, but I'm seeing a lot of excitement even from the MOU that we signed in Nakuru County last week. There's a lot of excitement amongst the counties to try and see how they can be able to use the direct use in form of having resource parks, you can call them industrial parks, where they can now be able to use the other geothermal opportunities. So it's something that in the next 5 years, when we finalize the feasibility study with what we are trying to do in Nakuru County in Menengai, I've seen excitement with the Baringo County as well. Mm-hmm. We want to also sound the other governors in Turkana, in Narok and Kajiado, so that we can now be able to look at specific MOUs that can be able to entice them to bring in investors who can then be able to scale up some of these direct use opportunities that we've demonstrated that can work. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Very well. Thank you so very much indeed for your time.
Thank you too.
Wish you well.
Thank you.
Well, Geothermal Development Company Managing Director Jared Othieno joining us tonight on Inside Government to help us discuss and understand where are we in terms of geothermal power development, and of course you have heard it from him, just to look forward for more power coming from geothermal. My name is O'Brien. You have been watching Inside Government. Thank you for your time. Stay right here. Thank you.